Hello, my name's Colleen Gertsch, and I'm with The Room to Write, and this is the Journey of a Story series where we sit down with local authors and talk about the writing process. And today we're talking to Karin Gertsch, and she has her most recent novel, 5 Wishes, with her, and a couple others she'll touch on. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So first we'll start by just trying to paint for the audience how you write. So sort of what's the physical space you like to write in, or if there's a schedule, or what instruments you use, technology, or good old-fashioned pen and paper.
Right. Well, I'm very comfortable working on a computer, and when I travel and write in Santa Fe, which I love to do, I always take my PC laptop with me, and so I write with that. But when I am home in my home office, I have an iMac, a desktop computer, and I have a conventional desk and my own space in an old bedroom, and that is a comfortable place for me. I'm looking out into a dogwood tree, which often has the birds in it. If the window's open, I can hear them. And it's a relaxing place for me. And I have found that that works.
Okay. And are you consistent? You know, sometimes people say you have to write every day, or you wake up at the crack of dawn, or what's yours?
I've talked with writers of various types and have heard that butt time is what counts. The most time you spend writing, the better off you are and the better your writing gets. I had a full-time job before, and I retired in 2010. And when I retired in 2010, I focused on writing that I had put off for quite some time. I've written essays and short stories. Some have been published. And I find that I like the short stories. It makes you write it very tight and concise, and every word has to count, especially if they tell you they only want 1,200 words, that's it. But the writing of longer books takes more time, and I work around when can I fit it in. That is to say, with my family and dog and laundry and gardening and all the things that get in the way in life. I'll go upstairs. Sometimes I'll work in the evening after dinner, or I might work early in the morning, or if no one's around, I might work in the afternoon. But I find that when I go to Santa Fe, I'm uninterrupted, and I can work for 5-6 hours straight, which I do every day for, say, 4 to 6 weeks, and I get a lot done.
So do you just power through on your first draft, or are you sort of doing a chapter and editing, or how, you know, what's your sort of process to getting it through there?
I find that if I write a chapter and I get that done, could be, I don't know, 5 to 10 pages, that's a lot. And then I will shut off the computer, I'll walk away from it. I might go and work in the garden or take a long walk and just rest my head. And the next day I'll come back to it. I'll reread everything I wrote the day before. And that helps me get into the next chapter.
Yeah.
And so it depends on what I'm writing.
Right, and you mentioned essays and shorter pieces. Is this since you were a child, or when did you start feeling like you really enjoyed writing?
Well, when I was in high school, I belonged to a literary club, and I belonged to the poet club, and I tried poetry, which I found very difficult. And wrote short stories in school on the side. But it wasn't until later in life that I really got serious about wanting to write something to express myself. And I can tell you which one I wrote first and what led me to that.
And so before you do that, did your career involve writing, or did it sort of, you totally went separate ways with writing for a while?
Right. Well, I've had several careers. I'm an older person, and I remember years ago reading an article somewhere that said the average person will have 5 careers in their lifetime. And I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. That will never be me. And I've stopped counting. But I was an educator, and I ran educational programs. First, I was a teacher in the classroom of English as a second language. I did a beginner and intermediate and advanced, ESOL, with adults. And later on, I became the director of education, and we were doing developing curriculum for everything from workplace education to citizenship classes, ESOL. We were getting ready to do home health aid training programs. And so that was very exciting for me because I did a demographic report at one point, and we had people from 23 different countries in our program.
Wow.
And every student had an individual lesson plan. It was a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
But
A lot of writing,
I
would think.
Writing. And then I became director of the program. So then it became admin, and it was totally different, and I had to have staff and so forth. But I always have had a soft spot for immigrants because I came to the United States from Germany, and I had to learn English, and I remember being discriminated against. And so I always was feeling, my heart was always with people from other countries and helping them find a safe place where we were. It was like it was sort of like the United Nations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and language is so important to survival, really. You know, the basic things you
And it
need
was
to
culture
communicate.
too. It
Yeah.
was sharing culture and helping to understand and bringing in
Nice.
speakers and that kind of thing.
Right.
But there's one book that I wrote that really made me feel at home. When I was growing up, I went to 14 schools by the time I reached the 9th grade in Manchester by the sea. And my education was so fragmented. I was either catching up or I was ahead of other students, having to listen to it all over again. The times table was a big one. And so I never had roots here, you know? And when I'd go to Germany, I'd feel, oh, I'm back home. And then I'd have to leave and come back here. And I think a lot of immigrants have this duality. They're not sure where they belong, you know?
Right.
They had to leave somewhere and come here. So can I launch into the first
Launch
book
away.
that I wrote? I'll hold it up.
Yeah.
So this book is out of print now, but it was written for the 375th anniversary of Gloucester back in 1995.
Okay. And this is your first book that you ever
This
published?
was my first book. And this book came about because I live in Essex, and I saw people packed on the causeway waiting to get into Woodman's, or people with their windows down. It was summer. And they would say, where am I? You know, this looks like a great place. And so I said to myself, do we have a Cape Ann and vicinity guidebook? And there was nothing. And so this book led to my feeling at home where I live now, because I explored what made Cape Ann. So what is Cape Ann? And I had a lot of help to do this book. This was self-published, but I used all professional people, editors and designers, and I got a lot of artwork from artists on Cape Ann, and permission to use photographs and pictures and so forth to enhance it, and maps.
So you were supporting the local economy at the same time as promoting it.
So 300 businesses got into this book.
Oh, wow. And what do you mean by that?
Well, the book has where to go, what to see and do, where to sleep, where to eat.
Right.
I even included all the churches on Cape Ann. I know when I travel, I love to go and see a different church somewhere, you know. And so all these businesses, a lot of them helped me sell the book.
Really?
The inns would have them at the front desk. The restaurants would have them at the exit of the restaurant where people paid their bill at the register. And so I spoke at Rotaries and Kiwanis, and I got a lot of exposure with it, and the book is sold out.
Right.
So, but what this book did was not only give me a feeling of living here and at home, if we're talking about the process. So here I am, I'm saying to myself, I'm going to write this book for Cape Ann, and I'd never written a book before. My first thing was to just go around to all the chambers and visitor centers and things to see and do, and I started packets of information. And so now I have this big folder. What is on Cape Ann? And I learned about the sea creature, the sea serpent that was seen by hundreds of people up and down the coast of Massachusetts in the 1800s.
We have our own Loch Ness here?
We do.
That's awesome.
So enough people saw him, that it became quite an event around here. So all these things came out, stories about people in Gloucester, Harold Blackburn, who crossed the ocean.
So did you go, when you went, you collected items for your research, but did you talk to people or?
Yes, and the people who were the most help to me were town clerks. Town clerks have an amazing amount of knowledge about what's going on in a community.
So like down at town hall or whatever.
Town hall or city hall, wherever. So now I had all this material. I had way more material than I could put into this little guidebook. So, but I didn't worry about that at the time. I said, I'm just gathering now. And so after that, I discovered that because I'm a very organized person.
I was going to say.
I think it's the German half of me, that it has to be orderly and organized. And so when I think in a straight line.
Right.
And so then I took a 3-ring binder, which got bigger and bigger, by the way. This is the biggest one I could find.
Yeah.
And in here, I started putting in tabs. And under each tab, I had to write about what's where. And when I got through writing all of this, it all needed to be edited. And CompSet in Beverly was the company that helped me make a book. And CompSet had a professional indexer, professional editors,
Do they still exist?
proofreaders. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
But this is over 25 years ago.
Like the publishing company you went through?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and they were amazing, and they were so patient, and they wanted this book to succeed.
Right.
So they had endless patience.
And I just think this is a great, I know that this is a travel guide, but this almost seems like a great way to organize, even if people are getting overwhelmed by figuring out how to organize their writing, even just a novel or a chapter book, to make those tabs and kind of keep you organized with your writing. That's a great idea.
Well, when I had my job, we had grant money from the Department of Education, Massachusetts Department of Education, and we had to prepare, each year to get the grant, we had to prepare our lesson plans and what were we doing and who were the teachers and all of the details. And we set up a 3-ring binder like this with tabs, and the state used it across the state as an example for how to organize to get ready for us to come down and check out your program. So I used that same process for this, which was perfect. And so once I had all the material down, of course that wasn't it.
It's not that easy, right?
So CompSet helped by going through and making passes. Each section had 4, 5, 6 passes, editorial passes, to make sure. And they said to me, you can't look for everything at once. When you make a pass, go through and look for punctuation. Next time, go through, look for spelling. Third time, go through and look for what does it all look like? Are you consistent in your use of words and so forth, and your tense and so forth?
Advice as well.
Which is a big thing for me, to stay with the same tense.
Right. I have that problem.
Yeah. So that was a big learning process.
Yeah. And so did they have editors? They're telling you to do that, but also they had editors that were doing it for you as well?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
So I would self-edit over and over again each section. But the surprising thing to me was that this book, and then I had to verify all my facts. because it was nonfiction.
Right.
So I found it's about the seashore and the land. So I used biologists at Mass Audubon to verify my information.
Wow.
I had an architectural specialist in Gloucester who has recently passed away, and she has written several books on the houses of Cape Ann, and she verified my architecture section. So each section I had professionals help
So
me
nonfiction's a lot more, to use the word, grueling.
A lot of people
involved than,
Yes,
say,
yeah.
your novel that
Yeah.
you wrote. Okay.
But from start to finish, this book took 1 year.
Really? Wow. I'm
I was
impressed.
amazed
Yeah.
myself. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was this one.
All right.
And each book is a different genre.
Right.
And each book required different time for writing. This one here, Flora Has an Adventure, came out in 2019, just before COVID hit.
Okay.
And
what
this-
prompted from travel
Right,
guide to children's book?
Right. Why don't I just stick to travel guides? Well, my daughter collected children's books, and my daughter died at 42, which was a terrible heartache for me. And I had this little nudge all the time that said, "Mom, why don't you write a children's book?" And I thought to myself, how can I? That would have been you, Elizabeth, not me.
Right.
You know? So I had retired in 2010, and we got all these little chicks, and we had a chicken coop, and I started watching them. And I realized that they were like people, these little hens.
Right.
They fought, they argued. One was bossy, one was gentle, and one was lame. She was injured. And I thought, you know, I could use the chickens to teach sort of without teaching, but
Right.
sort of say, you know, don't be so rude. You know, don't always want to be number one out of coop door, pushing
Right.
everybody aside. And what about her? She's injured, you know?
Right.
Be kind to people. Be kind. The chickens should be kind. People
Yeah.
should be kind. And all the chickens were a different variety.
Right.
So I thought, well, just like people, we're all different, but inside, we all want the same thing, you know?
Right.
We want to be loved, and we want to be appreciated and respected. So that led to Flora Has an Adventure, the first one. And she goes to the library. And so it's a true event.
Okay.
The library called me and said, "Karin, can you bring a chicken next Tuesday?" And
Why
I
not?
said, "Why not? Sure, I can do this." So I went in the cellar and got the dog crate and went to the coop and got the chicken. And Flora ended up going to the library and entertaining the children.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that led to the story. And
So another nonfiction.
actually, up to a point. Up to a point. She does lay green eggs.
Oh, wow.
So she's an Abericana. She's a special chicken that lays green eggs. And, but she jumped up on the computer table in the library and started pecking on the keyboard. And, well, you have to read
a
the
writer,
story to
too.
find out. But that's what led to the children's book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we take a left-hand turn and
And now,
another genre.
and now we end up with a first novel, 5 Wishes, which came out in June. And 5 Wishes I started 10 years ago.
Wow. So was that before any of these, and it was in the back of your mind the whole time, or just in a drawer somewhere?
Well, I wrote a speech. I'm backtracking now.
Okay.
But I wrote a speech back in 1992. I went to night school at Harvard Extension School, and I got my degree when I was 46. And one night I was fast asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I wrote the speech for commencement. And I came down to breakfast, and I said to my husband, "Oh, I don't know what happened to me, but I woke up in the middle of the night. I'm dreaming that I'm giving this speech at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge. Isn't that crazy?" And my husband said, "Write it down. right away, write it down. And so I said, I didn't believe him, but so I did. And I submitted it. And a week later, I get a call. He got a call. Harvard called, they want your speech. And I said, oh, I don't think so. You know, you're just pulling my leg. What I'm trying to say is that speech I wrote in the middle of the night in my head. The idea for this book came to me in the middle of the night in my head. And I said, you know, I'm going to write down the bones of it. So I wrote a synopsis. What is the story about? And what happens in this story? Why is it important? Who's the main character? What does she want? And so I wrote all that down in a very short 3 or 4 pages, 200 and something pages later. And it sat. And then my daughter was still alive at the time, and she was an editor for a publishing house in Cambridge. And I said, Elizabeth, take a look at this. What do you think? And so she suggested in the margins, in pencil, I still have her notes, focus on the woman, focus on the wife. The rest of them are there, but they're not important. She's the important one. And what does she want, you know? And so I wrote the whole thing in bits and pieces over time, with several trips to Santa Fe, by the way. And so finally, I had it all done, and I didn't like the last third. And I tore it all apart, and I rewrote the last third of the book and had a completely different ending. Did not like the ending. So that took some time.
And did you have like beta readers read it first, or you decided before you even give it to someone you didn't like
it? And then I had a reader, and then I had another reader, and then I came to the room to write. And I brought along the first chapter, I think, and kind of got a sense of what did people think, you know? Was it worth pursuing?
I remember it.
Was it worth pursuing? So I did finish it.
Good.
Yeah.
And so that was a 10-year process, basically. And were there any particular differences between your first publication, and I'm sure you've seen like the self-publishing, independent publishing change in those years, from when you did a travel guide, then you did a picture book, which involves illustrations and things like that too, and then now to your 5 Wishes novel. Any sort of, on the publication front, things that you want to kind of learned lessons or things that you can help others navigate that world with?
Right. Well, for example, this Cape Ann and Vicinity guidebook, when I wrote this in 1995, there was no content. And the local chambers had brochures, but they didn't have online information that people could tap into.
Right.
So this book was really important because it pulled the area together for people, and I was able to work digitally on my computer, and I had the help of CompSet with all the professionals.
So not a lot of competition out there.
No, there was no competition for this book. And then with Flora Has an Adventure, it was the illustrations, and I cannot draw. I love books that are illustrated by the same writers. I think they're so good, but I can't. I've tried. And so the publisher did all the illustrations, and they were done in-house. They were done in England. This is a UK publisher. And all the illustrations were done in England, but they asked me where to put the illustrations. What did I want the illustrations to look like? I pretty much wrote and illustrated through telling them what to do, which it turns out is a very unusual way to do it, because I've talked to other people who publish children's books, and they really want the illustrator to be able to roll with it. You know, here's the story in bullet form, each page, and just go with it. Come up with something. And so that was a surprise to me. And this one here, 5 Wishes, the interesting thing about these people, Atmosphere Press in Austin, Texas, which were great people to work with,
Okay.
they're located in Austin. The editor is in San Francisco. The cover designer who did this Eileen Donnan Castle on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, he's in Brazil.
Wow.
And the proofreader was in Minnesota. And all these people are working in their homes on their desktops and providing parts for this book.
And how interesting that your Cape Ann one was, which was about the local community, and it sounded like in Beverly was where you, like, it was very localized, and forward wind to this day and age where
it's international.
Anyone can be anywhere. Interesting.
That's true.
And
That's
how
true.
did you see a difference in dealing with the people remotely versus driving to Beverly? And
Right. Well, the driving to Beverly was like a almost daily event, depending on what we were working on at the time. With this, of course, I couldn't just, but they were very good, and they were all people who are professionals. So the editor was great. We worked with Over the Cloud, and so I had to get used to that. That was new for me. I remember when I learned to use computers at Harvard in 1986, when we had
they had computers back then?
Macintosh.
Commodore 64?
Macintosh,
Yeah,
the
okay.
huge tube. And I had to learn, I had to take a course.
Right.
I didn't want to.
Yep.
And so kicking and screaming, I went to that class. But in hindsight, if I hadn't, there are a lot of people my age who are very computer literate, and others who said, I don't want anything to do with it.
Right.
One thing I have learned now with this book is so much is online.
Yeah.
And I like to do speaking engagements. I love to go to the library, to the farm stand, and talk to the kids where the chickens are nearby.
Right.
But a lot of it's online.
And by that you mean the marketing of a book or the connecting with your audience.
Right,
Okay.
correct, both. And so the people where I do speaking engagements, they prepare like a flyer, and they'll put it up on their site, and I'll get a
Right.
copy and I'll put it on my Facebook page or my Instagram, which is a new account. And I have some up on YouTube.
Okay.
And so it's this cross-pollination,
Right.
but it's endless.
Yeah.
And it can be mind-boggling.
Right.
There's so much.
And so any advice on, are you enjoying the in-person versus the online, or is there a little you like of both, or any advice for people? Because that is a topic that comes up a lot, is the marketing of a book after the fact. That I don't know if your publisher helps you with that. Sometimes, depending on if it's traditionally published, they do a lot of that, but they don't do all of that. Anything on that you can offer up to people to steer them?
Well, if you like people and you like to go out and talk to children, you like children, I find that connecting one-on-one with my audience is my favorite way of doing it. So, for example, with the children's book, Flora Has an Adventure, my favorite place was Pathways for Children in Gloucester. And after I did the reading, and I have a prop. I didn't bring her with me this morning.
I was hoping to
but
see the chicken.
I know my chicken. She's handmade. And the kids love her. She's got real chicken feathers. And they get a chance to touch her in the end. And then she has a little pouch under her belly where she keeps her egg, her green egg. And I pull it out, and it's like, and she laid an egg, and the kids love it. And I pass the egg around, and then I ask them, would anybody like a hug? And all these kids, one little girl said, I want another hug. I want another hug. She had 3 hugs. So that was my biggest hug visit that I had with the kids.
That's awesome.
But then the other part is doing YouTube, or, having something that you film and you put up.
And this one is for adults, so you're not bringing a chicken around.
No,
right?
No chickens today. No.
And how are you marketing this one? I know that I've got to go to one of your book talks. Is that something that you enjoy as much but you don't have a chicken, so is it, it's different, obviously.
Right. Well, I've done two different things. I have a lot of props that I have from this book. For example, since I self-published it with the help of a lot of professionals, I went to the printer in Littleton, North Carolina, and saw the book come off the press.
Oh, wow.
And we took a lot of pictures, and we put together a 3-ring binder to show the process of cutting the pages and binding the book and the whole process at the printers. So I have things that I bring for that. And I like to talk about the 3 books because I don't know how many authors switch genres like this. You know?
Right. Just like your careers, you're switching careers
Couple.
and genres. It's keeping it
Yeah.
spicy, right?
Keeping it
Spice
and
of
it's
life.
a challenge. Each one has been a challenge for me. It's a different
Yeah.
process.
Right.
So I find that going to libraries, for example, and talking about the different books and the different processes is something that people find interesting. Because a lot of people out there want to write a book. They don't know how to start, or they have an idea, but they just can't seem to pull it together.
Right.
And I mean, to go from a book that took a year to a book that maybe took another couple of years, 2 years, to a book that did 10 years,
10
but
years,
not
yeah.
all the time. You know, it
Right.
sat and ideas percolated.
Right.
And it had fits and starts like traffic, you know?
Right.
You go and then you stop again.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point is, you know, depending on the genre, depending on what your life is at the time. I mean, there's no one way and there's no one timeline that books get written in.
Right.
So be patient with yourself in the process because it can happen. It just doesn't have to happen right away.
And you know, this book really, the characters start to tell you, I'm not going to do that. So you're trying to make them do something that's not in their makeup.
Right.
And so they start to guide you. And I find, anyway, for myself, that the more you get into the story and the more you have time to get in their heads and develop them psychologically, you may not even need a lot of language, you know. It just needs to be more concise. And so you just keep working it and keep editing it and taking out what's really superfluous, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And then through the editorial process, you know the characters a lot better at the end. So maybe that's, you know, helpful when you go back and sort of fill in their personalities a little more at the beginning.
And that's why the ending changed.
Right.
You know, it was all done, and I said, oh no, they don't want to do that. No, this isn't going to work.
Right.
So I
Wow.
said, that's it, chop.
So you have 3 different books over 3 different timelines to bring it all together somehow with one little piece of magical advice. Do you have anything to leave the viewers with if you were going to offer up a piece of writing advice to them?
My advice would be, if there's a story in you, it's got to come out. And everyone has stories. And sometimes I did a writing program with seniors a couple of times, and all they wanted to do was talk. So we got the tape recorder out at the time and just recorded stories because I found that perhaps their hand couldn't write the words anymore.
Right.
Or their thoughts were scattered, or for whatever reason, they just wanted to talk.
Right.
And so we found that recording helped. So there's no reason why you can't get the story out.
Right.
And sometimes it won't leave you alone. It's like a cockleburr. It just rears away on you and says, listen, I'm here.
Right.
And I'm not going away
Right.
until you listen to me.
Oh,
you
that's
know?
great.
And I have a shelf this wide anyway. Some people have more than that. Of books that I have read over the years on how to develop characters and how to proofread your work and edit your work. And Strunk and White's Elements of Style is like the standby. It's so concise and so small, but it just hits the nail on the head. And Stephen King wrote a great book on writing not too long ago
literally called On Writing.
On Writing. And I would recommend On Writing to young people, to anyone really.
Yeah.
And Bird by Bird by Lamont.
Showing
It's been
my
around
Savannah
for a
White
while.
here.
It's a classic.
Yeah, those are, and that's important for the viewers as part of your advice on getting the story out. Sometimes it's good to read about how to get the story out
Right.
from others who've done it, and it can be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's perfect advice, I think. However you need to get it out, writing, speaking, however, eventually you're going to have to get it out.
You will, or
You
it
don't have
won't
to
leave
share
you
it,
alone.
but you need to get it out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Karin.
Well,
it was
thank
great
you.
talking to you
Fun
today.
to be here, Colleen. I was looking forward to it.
Me too. And if anybody else would like to join us sitting where Karin's sitting and talk about your story from the beginning to the end, please contact us at theroomtowrite.org or email me at colleen@theroomtowrite.org.